We are here going into the semifinals. Jonty, it's been quite a journey to get here, and now we're down to
It
the top four
it sure has. We are top four, which means Golden Brave Little Taylor is confirmed.
in hand.
It's in. Well, I don't know if they're good out just yet.
Well,
I'm
that's
not sure. No, I'd if it was me, I'd want to wait. I'd be like, no, you can give me later. I'm not. I don't want to have to look after that and still play some games.
right. Less time for me to carry it around, but no, but still plenty on the line, playing for that trophy in particular. So yeah, and a full set of cards from Into the Inklands, including
Full
enchantments.
foil set, including enchanted, which is kind of insane, and a pile of products as well. Box products as well. So still a lot on the line, and also just bragging rights of saying that
Mm.
you won the thing, right? But at this point, yeah, Golden BLT is in the bag. So maybe pressure off just a little bit, but still a lot to play for as we move into the semifinals. We're going to take a look at our bracket, which should show you the four players that are left fighting it out for the place in the final. On the left there, we have Brian with Emerald Steel and Kurt with Ruby Amethyst, both of which we have seen on the stream earlier today. And then the other side, we have Jordyn and Tomasz, Emerald Amethyst versus Ruby Sapphire. And that's the game we're going to be taking a look at first.
Yeah, interesting thing. Look at the top four decks there. Four different color combinations, four very different decks. So out of a field of 2,000, we made, or 1,000 this time, made it down to the top four, and there's four completely different builds into the semifinals, which is kind of
It's
exciting.
very, very exciting. And we wear our heart on our sleeve. I'm going to say it again. I'm a big fan of Emerald Amethyst. Very happy to see it make its way here as well, which is the game we're going to be taking a look at now as well. So, should we dive in?
Yeah, let's take a look at which deck goes the distance and takes its owner into the finals.
You're going to need one more of them, you know. Just need one more.
I think I have it queued up as well.
Nice. We have Jordyn here on the left and Tomasz on the right. Jordyn with the Amethyst Emerald. We start off with a Goat in the Inkwell and a Cursed Merfolk. The first Cursed Merfolk I've seen this weekend, but one of my absolute favorite cards. So happy to still see it, seeing some play here in the top ends of the decks.
Yeah, so on the stream over the weekend, we've seen a lot of Ruby Sapphire. It's been very well represented. We kind of know what that deck's trying to do. It's a control deck trying to take things into the late game. We haven't seen as much Emerald Amethyst, even though that deck has been very popular in the first few sets. And last season in particular, I think it was one of the top decks. This time around, this version is doing something very similar, though, to the previous build. It can be very, very aggressive, and particularly in this control buildup, it has two lore characters on turns 1, 2, and now turn 3, with Jacques filling that high lore 3 slot. So here we have the opening that Jordyn is looking for. It is a 2 lore Cursed Merfolk on turn 1, a 2 lore Flynn Rider on turn 2, and it's going to start pushing the lore total pretty aggressively. There is a phase 2 to this game, which I want to talk about in a second, but I'm giving I'm gonna take a pause here.
Yeah, so you're right. The early game is very much just get carriages out, get them turning sideways, getting some early lore. And I think the reason why you're perhaps not seeing it quite as much as you did towards the end of the set 3 meta, very popular deck at the end of the set 3 meta. It's the deck that won me my Stitch at set championship, so I'm a big fan of it. I think the reason why it drops off a little bit is because how much of the Ruby and Steel removal just really sort of tears through that early game. A lot of the new Sisu stuff, the one drop Sisu with the base. We're not actually seeing that much play. And I feel like the reason we don't see much play is because it was an answer to this deck, which in turn dropped off, you know?
I think that's right. The other thing that I think made this deck a little tougher to play this time around is the prevalence of Emerald Steel. Steel removal is the early turn removal is really really good against this aggressive line in. Emerald Amethyst, and so I think the combination of the ruby removal and the steel removal being so prevalent is one of the reasons why people were a little shy from playing this at the season.
Here, Tomasz doing exactly what he wants to do with his deck, though, which is just ramp up into that mid to late game as quick as possible. We do have a brawl in hand, which I think is probably what he's going to be looking at using here to get rid of some of this stuff. We see a double Diablo, my goodness, and another Cursed Merfolk. Jordyn absolutely not letting up on the gas here at all.
Yeah, and Tomasz at this point thinking about trying to ramp into his late game mass removal. Unfortunately, only 5 ink on board, so he and without the quill on board right now, although I think he has one in hand, is really trying to get to the point where he can play a Be Prepared, although
Be
I don't think he has one in hand.
Yeah, be prepared. Or also the Sisu, the 8-drop Sisu, is also going to do a lot to this board, removing all characters with 2 or less, which would be a board wipe currently. Instead, we're seeing Medusa coming down, removing the Flynn. A lot of the stuff in Emerald here wants to be challenged, actually, to be removed. Both the Curse Merfolk and the Flynn will have your opponent discard a card if they're banished through challenging, but any other removal doesn't have that trigger. So Medusas or any targeted removal is a really great answer to them. We see a 2-drop Ursula come down here. She's able to discard a Song and just take a look at the hand, and yet Jordyn's just going to not see that be prepared and just absolutely just keep the foot on the gas here.
Yeah, and that Ursula may have been in hand for a while, but Jordyn waiting for the right moment when Tomasz has built out enough ink to play that Be Prepared next turn if he had it, and trying to snipe it at the last possible second there.
This deck, especially the Emerald side of this deck, has got a lot of stuff that you don't actually necessarily want to play on curve. You did mention the Jack before, the 3-costed Jack, and is just a great quester on 3, but also gives a character reckless for the next turn, the turn he comes out. So often you're kind of happy playing him down into a Tamatoa or a Hiram Flabbersham or something, just so that their questing abilities get cut off. And I think the other one there is the Ursula. She is a 2-drop, but a lot of the time you don't necessarily need to see her on 2. You want to see her just before the grab your swords in steel, or just before the be prepared in ruby.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the phase 2 of this game, but I don't think we're going to get there. I think Jordyn managing to go wide very quickly, Tomasz without the appropriate answers, and so this game will probably close out pretty quickly.
Yeah, finding a few answers there to clean up the board a little bit, but still has 5 on the board, and he's at 16. Can just quest out for the win. I'm not sure whether Tomasz had quite done the math there, or was just sort of playing it out just in case. But yeah, wow, that was a quick game 1.
Whew.
Didn't even get my boots tied.
I know. That's there we go. An aggressive line. Now that was very impressive from the Emerald Amethyst deck, and I do think this is a matchup that it's favored into. It was last season. It can go really get underneath that Sapphire Ruby deck. Now there is one line of play, as you mentioned, open to this deck now that can kind of prevent this opening, and that is the early turn 3 Sisu into a shift into the big Sisu on turn 5. And so if the Ruby Sapphire deck is able to kind of ramp into that play and have those cards available, that would definitely reset the board and send this game into what I call phase 2. So definitely hope there for the Ruby Sapphire deck, but what an opening.
Yeah, I think Tomasz there just was sticking to his regular line of ramping through the early game with Popsicle into 1 jump ahead. But here, yes, will most likely now definitely be look. It is open deck list, so we'll have known what he was up against there. But I think here in game 2, definitely is going to be looking for those early answers of brawls and Sisus. Yeah.
And it's just a tough line too, because having the brawl early is a great answer to some of these early aggressive cards, and you do want to play it. But if you're brawling on a particular turn, you're not ramping, and so
Mm.
even doing that is taking you off your game plan a little bit. So it's a tough line to walk between setting up your end game removal and then trying to do some early game control.
Yeah. So we'll see which line Tomasz takes here in game number 2.
Now, I've been talking about phase 2 a little bit because this deck does not have to, the Emerald Amethyst deck does not have to win super early. What it really wants to do, especially against control decks, is rush out to an early lore lead, perhaps into the early teens. 12, 13 lore would be really, really nice. And then oftentimes it expects its opponent to gain control of the board, whether it's with a couple grab your swords or a be prepared or perhaps a Sisu in this instance, as we just talked about. At that point, the game kind of shifts into phase 2, where it's looking to scratch out the last few lore with some evasive characters in this iteration of the deck, or perhaps goat bounces. So this game, if it does go long, this is not an aggressive deck that needs to win early. It doesn't quite burn out, but it wants to set it up so that it's capable of closing out the game during that phase 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Building that foundation in the early game just through more traditional means, more through just regular questing, so that you can then start to worry even less about what your opponent is doing with that sort of stuff. Again, we see an absolute classic start here with 1 jump ahead on turn. Develop your brain into a 1 jump ahead. Curse Merfolk for Jordyn. That's going to definitely start turning sideways alongside an Ursula, who's going to take a look at a couple of brawls that she can't hit.
Ah,
One of the
look at
reasons
this.
why Why it's a popular play, I think, is because it's an action, but it's not a song. Ursula specifically only grabs song. Bare Necessity is the other card that does that. Is able to take any non-character, but Ursula, she's very single-minded. That Ursula, she's only looking for songs.
Very on flavor. But Jordyn getting a good look at Tomas's hand here and seeing something very interesting. We talked about this Sisu that's available on turn 5 if you shift her, and Tomas has that line available in his hand. And so Jordyn, knowing that on turn 5 that Sisu's coming out, is going to be very careful about overextending here and knowing the board could be wiped.
Yeah, exactly. Normally, you would be looking at playing one, maybe even two characters here, but knowing next turn, that's online. It might ease up a little bit here. I'm also thinking about what sort of three strength characters there are in the deck that he could put down. Maybe bouncing something with a snake wouldn't be a terrible idea here if he's able to. I'm not sure. We'll see. No, we just said we just see a Diablo, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Jordyn knows that that's there. Perhaps thinking, it's going to be played anyway. I may as well draw it out, get that card out of the hand. And there is a downside to shifting cards too. You replace a card on the board, so rather than having Jordyn or Tomas pursuing his ramp gameplay, he pulls that Sisu out. Yes, there's a big character on the board. It does remove everything, but it allows Jordyn then to start resetting and building his board again.
I think so as well. I think it might be worth pointing out here. I've only actually really just noticed that Tomas is using replacement cards for the inkwell. So what we're doing is when we ink cards, we're moving them over to a pile just under the discard there. You can see that with a Maleficent. And then we're bringing in another card to act as your ink for that turn. This is perfectly acceptable. It is in the rules of the game. As long as the cards that you're using are clearly not Lorcana cards, that is something you are now able to do.
There's a few benefits to this. One of them is it is very common for players to set their hands down on the table. I've done it several times, and occasionally you lose track of which is your hand and which is your inkwell if you're playing sloppy. So this kind of avoids that problem.
Yeah. We see a goat coming down there. Not only a great lore generator, that 4/3 stat line is going to push it past a lot of the ruby removal. But yeah, you can definitely see Jordyn shifting the game plan here and taking the foot off the gas just a little bit and just extending enough just to keep the pressure on, but not leaning too far into the Ruby issues that he's going to have with things like Be Prepared or that Sisu if we see it come down.
I do need to correct something too. I think I misspoke earlier and called Sisu a shift 5. She is a shift 6, and so that allows
Ah,
her to
okay.
double to 6. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
So now then, this turn she could come down, but he's doing a lot less this time.
yes,
We might still see her come down anyway. Good body. Instead, we see a Maui going into Ursula. Maui here doing the classic 2-for-1, I think at least. Here Maui just being able to clean up the board a little bit, but next turn, very comfortably going to be able to take something else out as well.
here we have the goat questing again, sending up to 8 lore.
Probably see a snake bouncing it. Yeah.
Bouncing the goat. And that's what you want to do with goats. Goat, you can get maximum value out of the goat if you are able to return it to your hand and play it several times. Leaving it on the board exposed to be banished is not really what you want to do with it in these matchups.
We see another Diablo coming down here. I'd love a look at Thomas's hand at this point because it really does. It would really be interesting to see what we're working with. We see that shift Sisu, just getting rid of the Diablo, but you still don't mind that. A big body that can sit down and quest, start closing that lore gap, be a bit of a problem for Jordyn to deal with, and yeah, being able to get rid of that Diablo before it's online as well.
One of the challenges for these Emerald Amethyst decks is there's not a lot of removal. There's some bounce, so you can send cards back to your opponent's hand, but not a lot that banishes your opponent's characters without challenging. Jordyn, if he does want to remove the Sisu, does have Madam and Fox available or as a rush character, but really that's the only immediate answer to Sisu unless you want to send it back to your opponent's hand, and in this case, giving him 2 Sisus to play again.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's a shifted Floodborn there, it would both cards would go back to hand and then become separate cards again. We also see a Great Stone Dragon here, which is an interesting piece in Sapphire. It's a 3-costed inkable item. It comes into play exerted, but then each time you are able to exert it to put a character card from your discard into your inkwell face down and also exerted. So a lot of exertion there, making sure that this card doesn't get too out of hand because otherwise it would be really really strong. Being able to just have something going from your discard into your inkwell each turn would be a really incredible way to ramp. So it's the edge is taken slightly off it here with the exertion, but even still, it's going to be an item that comes down. Jordyn won't have any way to deal with it, and it's just going to be able to keep that ink rolling for Tomasz without having to take any cards out of his hand or even off the top of the deck.
Yeah, just continue to build that ink advantage, and that's one thing that these control decks want to do: build up their inkwells to allow them to do big plays in the late game. Jordyn going a
Yeah,
little wide here.
yeah, I kind of was probably trying to deal with putting some of the pressure on here. We actually see a goat trading into the Sisu because at this point, the law lead is what's going to give Jordyn the win here. I think Tomasz is happy to go into the game a little longer here, happy to kind of draw it out a little bit. Jordyn's going to want to start closing this out, and we see that happen perhaps with a castle coming down. This Queen's Castle has put in so much work this weekend for Amethyst players. Like really, like I've always loved the card. It's always done well, but I really think it's shone this weekend as being the way that Amethyst has closed out games.
There really just is generally no immediate answer for it. I mean, oftentimes the answer is to send a big-bodied rush character into it, like Maui. But Maui with 6 on strength and the castle with 7 willpower means it takes just a little bit extra to shut it down. So usually players can get at least 2 lore off of it, if not more. And when you can set up that extra card draw, like Jordyn's kind of set up here with Diablo, it's just even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it does have two characters go into it, that's two characters challenging that aren't questing. It's two characters that are challenging and not challenging to your characters. Even that is perhaps just good enough.
Mhm.
But it does seem that we'll get at least a turn out of it. Oh, maybe not with a double Maui, but even having to throw two Mauis into it and keeping that Merfolk and the Mim there on board, it's just a lot of value. I feel.
Well, and you really can't go into it with 16 lore on the board. Really, every lore matters, and so getting rid of 2 lore with the cursed merfolk, and then another lore here. I think that's a snake in the glare. There is that right?
I think it is a snake. Yeah, we've actually changed our minds on that one. No cards in hands for Thomas, so he didn't have to lose a card from the Merfolk, and then just using that ice block to make that trade a little neater. Just taking one less damage on the Maui there. We gain 2 from the castle. A goat here wins it. We can quest with the Diablo, um, which we are doing so. Do we see the goat for the win?
And of course, the extra card from the castle, giving him another chance to draw it. But it's
Mhm.
3 ink, not 4.
Yeah, I think we'd have seen the goat come smashing down if it was there
Right.
at this point. Instead, we're just going to build up some board presence with a fox. Oh, actually, we're going to trade the Maui there, just making it so that that castle is most likely going to stick around for another turn and then generate the win, even if we see removal for the Diablo.
Because there is character removal here. Be prepared would
Mhm.
clear off the characters, leaving the castle standing, and so getting that
Yeah.
Maui off the board was very important.
That's an absolutely great line, actually. Yeah, because the Maui on its own isn't enough to go into the castle. B prep leaves the castle around, and there we go. That's a 2-0 for Jordyn with Amethyst Emerald. My goodness.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but remembering back in brackets, I think we only saw one Emerald Amethyst enter the top
It might.
64,
I think it might have been two,
maybe a two.
but it was a very low number.
That's true. And Jordyn was the second seed, so playing very well all through Swiss, coming in here with the number 2 seed, being on the play all the way through, and here showing why this deck has been so dominant for him heading into the finals.
Yeah, just absolutely racing underneath Ruby Sapphire. Thinking about what he might come up against in the final now. I don't have the info
I think it
to
could be.
hand very quickly.
Yeah,
So
we're really quick. I think it's Emerald Steel on the one side, which would be, I think, a tougher matchup for it. So I'd be excited to see that play out. And I believe it's Ruby Amethyst is the other that it could possibly see.
which is
So
a matchup that I kind of favor with into Emerald Amethyst, honestly. So yeah, we'll be interested to see how that one goes. We're going to pass you back to the on-site team for that. They'll be right with you after this.